The first letter looked like it had been sent by a vindictive kindergarten teacher with access to glitter. It came in a cheap pink envelope sealed with a sunflower sticker, and it was taped right to my front door like somebody wanted the whole street to watch me get scolded. I opened it half expecting a bake sale flyer, and instead found a $500 fine from an HOA I didn't even belong to. My name's Damon Kessler. I'm a carpenter. And 3 months before all this started, I bought a little one-story ranch on Maple Ridge because it was specifically outside any homeowners association. That was the dream, honestly. No dues, no clipboard tyrants, no strangers measuring your grass, like they were preparing an indictment. The place had a wide driveway, a deep porch, and enough room out back for the cedar pergola I'd wanted to build with my own hands for years. Quiet street, decent neighbors, good light in the afternoons. The kind of place that makes a man think maybe life can still be simple if he chooses carefully enough. Turns out simple can get ambushed. Her name was Judith Newell, president of the Maple Ridge Estates HOA 3 blocks down across the road and technically outside my area altogether. Judith had that look some people wear when they've been given a tiny amount of power and decided it means destiny chose them. Blonde bob, oversized sun hat, posture stiff as a fence post, lips always pressed together like she was holding back the urge to fine the sky for being the wrong shade of blue. She showed up the next morning while I was loading lumber into my truck and stared at my half-finished pergola like it had insulted her ancestors. "You'll need to remove that," she said. "Not hello, not good morning, just that." I asked her if she was lost. She pointed toward the curb and told me my property was visually connected to Maple Ridge Estates, and because I used the same street access as their residents, I was expected to comply with community standards. I remember just standing there with a board on my shoulder, blinking at her trying to figure out whether this was real life or the opening scene of a dark comedy. I told her she had no authority over my house, no legal claim, no contract, no dues, no covenant, no nothing. I owned the property outright. She tightened her mouth into a thin, hard line and said I'd be hearing from her attorney. 3 days later, I got served. She actually filed a small claims complaint against me, $500 for unauthorized exterior modifications, plus demands that I remove the pergola, repaint my garage door, and reconsider my landscaping because it clashed with community cohesion. I sat in my truck rereading the paperwork while the engine ticked in the heat and the steering wheel burned against my hand, and somewhere between the second and third time I looked at her name on the complaint, I stopped being annoyed and started getting interested. Because Judith had made one bad mistake. She assumed I was the kind of man who'd pay a fake fine just to make the hassle go away. What she didn't know was that I'd spent years dealing with permits, zoning offices, inspectors, boundary maps, easements, all the little paper wars that decide who gets to do what on a piece of land. And what she really didn't know was that my security camera had already caught her on my property the week before trespassing with 2 board members and a measuring tape like they were surveying conquered territory. So that night I got to work. The house was quiet except for the hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional groan of old wood settling in the walls. I sat at my kitchen table with county maps spread out beside my laptop, property records, open city archive files, half-loaded coffee going cold by my elbow. Around midnight, I found the first crack in her story. Around 1 in the morning, I found the second. And somewhere close to 2, when I dug up the original HOA charter buried in county records, I found the thing that made my pulse kick hard enough I actually leaned back in my chair and laughed. The charter she kept waving around had expired 5 years earlier. Not maybe expired, not questionable. Expired, dead, gone, never renewed. And once I saw that, I started pulling harder. I called my buddy Cody, a land use attorney with the driest sense of humor God ever gave a man. And by sunrise, we were building a binder thick enough to stun livestock. Deeds, maps, charter documents, survey lines, screenshots, timestamps, trespassing footage, public records, everything. By the time court day came, I wasn't walking in to defend a pergola. I was walking in to start dismantling a scam. The courthouse that morning had that flat, stale silence government buildings always seem to wear, like the air itself is tired of paperwork. My boots sounded loud on the tile. I still had my work clothes on, denim shirt, jeans, dust on my cuffs because I had a job site later and I wasn't wasting a clean blazer on Judith's fantasy kingdom. Cody walked beside me carrying the binder and muttered, "This may be the stupidest case I've ever touched." And I once handled a boundary dispute over a decorative goose. Judith was already there with 2 board members and some nervous-looking excuse for legal representation. She sat stiff at the plaintiff's table folder clutched to her chest, jaw set like she thought sheer confidence could replace facts. When the judge asked her complaint, she stood and launched into it like she was presenting a national emergency. My property, she said, was visible from their neighborhood and therefore harmful to their standards. I had ignored written warnings. I had defied HOA authority. I was undermining visual integrity. The judge asked the only question that mattered. Is he a member of your HOA? Judith didn't even flinch. Not formally, she said, but the charter extends conditional authority over adjacent properties. Cody leaned over and whispered she just invented law in real time. When it was my turn, I stood up, opened the binder, and handed over the first set of documents. I showed the deed, then the official survey maps, then the original charter, then the county record showing it had expired and was never renewed. I told the judge my property wasn't partially outside their jurisdiction. It was entirely outside it. Then I handed over stills from the camera footage and explained that Judith and 2 board members had entered my property without permission on 3 separate occasions. That changed the room. Then Cody added the piece that really made the floor tilt. We had statements from other homeowners outside the HOA who'd received the same kind of fake fines. One of them had actually paid. We had the canceled check. It had been deposited into the HOA operating account. That was the moment Judith stopped looking offended and started looking scared. Her lawyer tried to call it a misunderstanding. The judge didn't buy it for half a second. He dismissed the complaint on the spot, then said words I still enjoy replaying in my head. Fraudulent enforcement of non-existent authority. He referred the matter to county civil governance and the district attorney's office for review. Judith sat down so hard her chair squealed. Outside the courthouse, Cody stuck a toothpick in his mouth and said, "Well, now they're going to dig." And they did. Within days, county investigators were knee-deep in Maple Ridge Estates records, and what they found was uglier than even I expected. Judith and the board had spent over a year sending official-looking notices to homeowners around the perimeter of the neighborhood people outside the HOA people with no obligation to comply, threatening them with fines, liens, legal action, all of it fake. They called it a buffer zone, which sounds ridiculous now, but fear makes bad nonsense sound official when it arrives on paper with enough bold font. One woman, Marisol, had paid because she was terrified they'd come after her house. Another family tore down their daughter's swing set because Judith claimed it blocked the neighborhood's line of sight. A man repainted his fence twice in 1 month because 2 different board members sent 2 different violation notices with 2 different approved colors. Somebody had even spray-painted non-compliant across a backyard shed. People hadn't obeyed because Judith was right. They obeyed because they were tired, busy, worried. And because bullies love paperwork precisely because it makes cruelty look administrative. Then came the twist none of us saw coming. About 2 weeks after court, I got a call from Detective Alton and learned the money trail didn't stop at fake fines. Investigators had found unauthorized funds paying for private home upgrades. Judith's patio extension landscaping at the vice president's house, security cameras installed at Judith's place using HOA money. And then Alton lowered his voice and said, almost like he still didn't quite believe it himself, "We also found the original ballots from last year's board election. She lost, then falsified the results." That one hit different. Fraud for money is ugly. Fraud for control is something colder. That evening, I went by the old HOA office, a glorified pool shed turned mini-regime headquarters, and found Alan, the former treasurer, standing across the street by his SUV, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He swore he hadn't known where the money was going. At first, I didn't buy much of what he said, but then he told me Judith had made everything sound confidential. Temporary county approved, always verbal, never written. And when he finally got suspicious enough to quit, he'd quietly kept copies. "Are you willing to testify?" I asked him. He answered so fast I knew he'd been waiting for somebody to ask. That was the moment the whole thing broke open. Grand jury subpoenas, affidavits, email threads, invoices, ledger entries, shell company reimbursements. The more they pulled, the more came loose. A junior accountant from one of the contracting firms stepped forward and confirmed that invoices marked as common area beautification had actually paid for private residences, including Judith's. Alan handed over backup documents. Alton tied fake vendors to Judith's family network. By then, it wasn't an overreaching HOA anymore. It was a criminal racket wearing khaki and carrying clipboards. The day Judith got indicted, she was at a golf club in the next county, halfway through an iced tea on the patio when deputies walked up and cuffed her. I didn't see it in person, but I saw the photo later. Son had in one hand disbelief all over her face, like accountability was somehow the rude one in that interaction. And the beautiful thing was, once her grip broke, the neighborhood didn't collapse. It breathed. People came out. The morning after the HOA was officially dissolved, my porch filled with folding chairs, lawn chairs, coffee cups, donuts, kids' stories. Marisol brought pastry boxes. Wes brought a Bluetooth speaker and old classic rock. Folks stood in my yard and told the truth out loud for the first time. About the fines, the threats, the weird inspections, the quiet humiliation of being pushed around by people who counted on everyone being too polite or too exhausted to fight back. Nobody was really celebrating me. What they were celebrating was relief. Freedom has a sound, by the way. It sounds like neighbors laughing where they used to whisper, kids playing where somebody once said a swing set was a violation, hammers and rakes and music instead of warning letters and passive-aggressive notices taped to trash cans. A few weeks later, the county held its oversight hearing. Media vans lined the parking lot. Reporters hovered outside. Inside evidence rolled out piece by piece, clean and brutal. Embezzlement, conspiracy, criminal trespass, election tampering, fraudulent fines, misuse of dues, possible tax fraud. By the end of it, the county recommended expanded criminal charges and civil forfeiture against assets bought with misappropriated funds. Back on Maple Ridge, the residents voted unanimously to dissolve the HOA permanently. That part still makes me smile. All that fear, all that fake authority, all that noise about standards and order and visual integrity. And when people finally got a real choice, they buried the whole machine. The park reopened under county maintenance. Somebody painted a mural on the old HOA office wall, bright flowers, hand tools, a tilted scale, justice winning by just enough to matter. Marisol put her daughter's swing set back up and added a tire swing for good measure. Wes built a fire pit and started hosting weekend cookouts. People painted their houses whatever color made them happy. And I finished my pergola, stained it a rich cedar red because after everything that happened, it felt right to make the thing a little impossible to ignore. I sit under it some evenings with a cold drink and watch the light slide across my yard, across the line Judith swore she controlled across a neighborhood that turned out better the second fear stopped managing it. And I think about what the whole mess taught me, because there was a lesson in it, though, not the clean little kind people print on decorative signs. It's this: most abuse doesn't arrive wearing a villain's face. It shows up holding a form, using official language, counting on your hesitation. It bets that you're too busy, too unsure, too worn down to question somebody who sounds certain. And sometimes the only thing standing between a bully and an empire is one tired person finally saying, "Show me the paperwork." That was the real crack in Judith's kingdom. Not anger, not revenge, proof. Still, I'd be lying if I said the ending didn't feel good. Because justice is satisfying, sure. But karma, with handcuffs, audits, forfeiture proceedings, and a permanent ban on community leadership that has a little more flavor to it. So now I keep every one of Judith's letters in a drawer by the kitchen, pink envelopes and all, not because I'm sentimental, and not even because I'm angry anymore. I keep them because memory matters. Because homes don't just get taken with bulldozers or fire. Sometimes they get taken inch by people who mistake control for order and intimidation for leadership. And the wildest part is she thought she was protecting the neighborhood. What she was really doing was teaching everybody in it how fragile fake power becomes the second someone refuses to kneel. So here's what I want to know. When somebody abuses a little local authority like that, hiding greed and ego behind rules and community standards, what counts as justice? Getting the money back, losing the title, going to jail, or living long enough to watch the people you tried to control build something better without you? Tell me what you think. Who was right? Who crossed the line? And have you ever dealt with somebody who acted like a crown and a clipboard were the same thing? Share your story.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.